Peace, family. This is Tariq. Welcome back again for another day, another episode of Knowledge Corner. All right, today's insight: walking alone with God. Walking alone with God. I got this from the song "All I Do Is Think of You" from the Jackson 5. This is off of their Moving Violation album that was released on May 15th of 1975. Interesting history on this song for me, because the first time I heard this song, it actually wasn't the Jackson 5, it was actually Troop. Troop remade this song. It was on their second album that was entitled Attitude. That song, the album was released on October 13th of 1989. That is that. All I Do Is Think of You, Spread My Wings, and I'm Not Soup were my songs from that album. And this being the All I Do Is Think of You was actually the second, was the first song on the second side of the album. This is when albums came on either a cassette or vinyl. I had the tape, so it was easy to get to it because I played the second side of the Attitude album all the time. But anyway, the Jacksons actually released this as the B-side of the first single off of that album, which was titled Forever Came Today. And then they got so much good feedback from the song, they actually released it as a standalone single. So it was actually the second and final single from that Moving Violation album. It was released in October of 1975. I want to say this was their last Motown album before they left Motown and signed with Gamble and Huss Philly International, because I think the next single was Enjoy Yourself. So the part of this song that always resonated with me was when they say, I began to take the long way home just so I can be alone. Now, if you've ever heard the song, the song is talking about, it's pretty much talking about puppy love. Excuse me. And in the song, he's saying he's taking the long way home so he can be alone, so he can get his thoughts together and he can actually kind of think about how, fine she is and all that type of stuff. But me being me, and me knowing my God, that's not what the message was for me to get from this song. For me, it was letting me know that I need to walk alone with my God. When you look at our lives are filled with so much hustle and bustle. Sometimes we miss hearing God's voice. And the only way we can do that is by walking alone, is by, for me, I may go for a walk. I like going into the wilderness. Excuse me. So I may actually go and I have a nature trail, behind, where I live. So I'll go out there and I'll actually walk. And get my thoughts together, and I have, a little lake and river back, where I am, I'm walking by that and I'm actually getting my thoughts together. When you look at Jesus, Luke chapter 5, verse 16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. His disciples say that all the time. Jesus will go off and be in seclusion, because he's walking alone with God. He's doing that in order for him to get the message that he's supposed to get. again, being away from people, sometimes you have to do that because you're not going to be able to hear God's voice the way you need to. Surah Al-A, which is the 7th surah, this is the 205th ayat in this book. And do thou, O reader, bring thy Lord to remembrance in the very soul with humility and in reverence, without loudness and words, in the mornings and evenings, and do not thou of these who are unheedful. Again, walking alone with God. It even says in this verse, with humility and in reverence, without loudness and words, in the mornings and evenings. So you're basically not conveying and not listening to God's voice when it's loud out. You have to go somewhere and you have to be able to hear it. One thing I can say about Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. They both took time away and went into seclusion to actually get God's voice and get God's message. As I've said before, the Prophet Muhammad was illiterate. So when he would go off into seclusion, he would go into a cave in a mountain, and the angel Jibril would come to him and give him verses in the Quran. And he would go back and he would give those to his, his companions, one being one of his wives, as well as some of his, companions that walk with him. He would give them those verses and they would write them down for him. And that's how the Quran was brought to us by that way. Anytime I can think of when I go out and I go on a walk, I always get the answer that I'm looking for. Again, you have to be able to clearly hear the thoughts that are going on in your mind. That's how God speaks to us. Sometimes, depending on where we are, it's not necessarily God speaking to us, but our conscience, because we know our conscience, our spirit knows what's best for us. But when you really want to go out and you really want to be able to find the right answer, you have to be able to walk with God. I've been going through my journey for a long time. And right now I'm in the transition of moving from one city to another. So having to go through the process of being able to, find a place to stay, and, moving all of my belongings from one place to another is somewhat wearing on me. Filling out, agreements to possibly have a place to stay, hoping and praying that you're approved. Sometimes when you go out and you walk and you're able to hear God's voice, a lot of those times he's telling you, or he may tell you, okay, do this, do that. And a lot of times for me, when I've done that, I've gotten the answer that I needed to get. So take some time out, go for a walk. That way you can actually hear from God. You can hear God's voice. You can hear him speaking to you. Again, I began to take the long way home just so I could be alone to walk with God. As always, like, comment, share, subscribe. Positive energy activates constant elevation. Peace.